Hello and welcome to the Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software. And today we are going to be talking about JSON Forms, but we're also here to take your questions. You can type those questions into the questions box or the chat box of the GoToWebinar control panel, or you can send them to us at guides, GUIDES, at alphasoftware.com. So, excuse me, let us begin. So JSON Forms, what are JSON Forms and why should we use them? Well, JSON Forms are a new feature that came out, it was a new feature. It came out a year and a half ago, but we haven't really talked about it very much. I think we brought it up maybe in one of our DevCons, but it's a really powerful feature. It was inspired by Alpha Transform as a quick way to generate forms, but it's also now being used in Alpha Transform as the new interface for the home control, which we demonstrated about a month ago. So it's used in a bunch of different places, but the question is, so what is it and why would you use it? So let's go ahead and do that. But before I go any further, the question that I always ask at the beginning of every single webinar is, can you hear me and can you see my mouse moving around here on the screen? If the answer is yes, type that into the questions box. Oh, all good. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay, so let's begin. Let's take a look here at, and I'm going to move here to full screen. Slideshow, play from current. Here we go. Let's take a look at these two UX components. Both of them have been laid out to create a form. Though they both have 203 fields, all having to do with apartment inspection this time, just for variety. Oops. And one is done just the regular way, and that is by laying out text fields directly onto the UX. The one on the right, however, is a JSON form, and you'll notice the structure is a bit different. You don't see the fields here. Instead, the fields have been defined into what's called a JSON form. So the question is, why would you want to do that? Well, the first thing is obviously it does kind of make it easier to manage your components when you're working with them. It is a little bit faster to save them, especially as your components get rather large. But there are some other reasons as well. One reason is that it is a slightly, and I emphasize slightly though, lighter weight method of delivering an application to the client device. And what I mean by that is that if you take a look at both of these, the regular form and the JSON form, you'll see that the regular form took about 3.2 seconds to load. The JSON form a little bit less, 2.7 seconds, about half a second less. Percentage-wise, it's somewhat significant. And if you've got a lot of people hitting your server, that can be a big deal. Or if you grow beyond, say, 200 fields and you go into a lot more fields, it can be a big deal. There are other ways of making lightweight forms. You can use, for example, the view box control with a list and have editor sets to edit your data. We will talk about that again in an upcoming webinar. We won't go over that today. Today, we're just going to be looking at JSON forms, because besides being lighter weight, they also have a really cool magic trick that they can do. And that trick is, look, that they can be used to create what we call data-driven forms. So a data-driven form, unlike a form that you lay out line by line, actually takes its questions and its field types and other things from a spreadsheet or a database, or they could also be generated using JavaScript or XBasic to create the definition on the fly while the user is using it. So one big benefit, though, let's say to the spreadsheet or database method, is if you have a client or maybe your own business that has got a bunch of forms with a bunch of fields, and those fields are already kept in a database. This is actually surprisingly common when you start talking to manufacturing companies who've got lists of tests that they perform, quality tests. Those are often tracked in at least a spreadsheet, but sometimes even in a database. And with JSON forms, you can actually use the database to generate the form, meaning that if you wanted to go and make changes to this form, you could just change the database, which is much easier for someone with less technical skills than folks who we have here on the call today, I know who are all excellent Alpha Anywhere developers, but it means that you could supply a spreadsheet to your client, say, change the spreadsheet, it'll change the form, and all is good. So that is really one of the biggest features. The other big feature, of course, is that it can dynamically be changed programmatically. So there's an awful lot that JSON Forms can do, and I am sorry that we haven't really gotten into it until today, but we'll try to make up for lost time. So some of the topics that I want to go over today are documentation. In other words, where do I find out about this? Because there isn't a lot of written documentation, but there are a ton of videos on this, and they're really good videos, and we'll help you out. We're going to go through those. We're going to take a look, and this is really in no particular order, of how you set values in those fields using JavaScript. That's something that you do all the time when you build an application, but it's a little bit different when you're doing a JSON form. We're going to talk about dynamically creating forms and importing the form definitions from a spreadsheet. We're also going to take a look at what's called the JSON's Form Genie. We'll take a look at styling, the fact that it's got containers, much like you have in the regular UX, so you can do tab controls, accordion controls, and things like that, and how there are special controls that are also available. It can also handle hierarchical data, which is terrific. So you can have repeating sections. So you have parent and child and grandchild relations, really as detailed as you want to go. And JSON Forms handle this really, really well. All right. So let's begin first by telling you where you can find the documentation, because if you haven't played with this very powerful feature, you're going to want to. And let me go ahead and just grab that out of my PowerPoint. I'm going to grab this link here, and I'm going to paste that into the chat window. And I suggest you guys grab that. You can also do a Google search and for JSON Forms, and you should find it there as well. But it is not currently documented with written documentation in our documentation systems. You'll find it in release notes, and you'll find it here at this URL. But we will get to that. So the next thing is let's go take a look at one. So let me just pop over here on my Windows machine, and let's take a look at those forms that I had built before. So this was, I'll show you this one really quickly. This is the standard one, the regular form. I'm just going to open this up, and you'll see this is the one that has all of my fields on it. Oh, it looks like 190 something fields. Okay, that's fine. And then this is the one that has got all of the fields wrapped up here inside the JSON form. I can double click on that to open up the properties, and you'll see that here are all my fields here with names and labels. They can all be adjusted over here on the left. Let's go ahead and build a new JSON form from scratch just to show you how that works. Exit without saving. Yeah, we'll exit. All right, so I'm going to create a new UX component. It'll be a blank one. And I'm going to add a control, and it's going to be a JSON form control. There we go. And just one. That's fine. Now, when I create that control, I can double click on it to set its properties. Let me go ahead and just save this away right now. And we're going to call that JSON Form Webinar. All right, let's go take a look in here. And you'll see that it's blank. So what you do to add your fields is you add items. So I can click this Add Item button, and I can say text box. I can click OK. And much like when you add a control in the UX, you get the ability to either put in a single control or multiple controls at once. So a single control, you'd give it a label, like let's say you'd call it first name, and the variable name for that might be first name. And then that's it. I click OK, and I've got one. Or I could do it the multiple way. Oops. Sorry. Add item, text box, OK. Create multiple, and then I can put in a comma delimited list. And actually, that's what I did yesterday. I had ChatGPT come up with a list for me, and you can put in you can list them all out here. So you can just paste in a whole bunch of names, and it will create the fields for you. All right, let's go back and let's add one more. Let's add a couple more fields. I'm going to go text box, create multiple. So I'm going to say last name, and I'm going to say city. Okay. So I've got 3 fields here. So let's take a look at it. I'm going to click preview. And there are my 3 fields, first name, last name, and city. We'll go ahead and close that. Preview button. Oh, there is something I do want to show you here, which is pretty cool. Oh, if I haven't broken it, let me close that. Let's go back into preview. Let's say you had a whole bunch of controls here. You can actually, in this preview, click on a particular control and it jumps right to that control in the list. It's no big deal when you just have 3 fields, of course, but when you have 200, it's actually very, very handy to say, oh, where was I in this form? You can click here and it goes there. Just a cool thing I want to point out in the preview that you can do. All right, let me go ahead and click OK on that. And now I'm just going to go ahead and let's save that again. And now I've got a form. Now this probably may remind you of the view box control where you're adding items and stuff like that, except in this case, we actually have fields, which means that those fields can be edited and submitted to a database or data source. So we can go ahead and just add our regular submit and reset buttons right onto our form here. And now we're good to go. And the only thing that one thing I want to do here, and this is actually a really cool trick, is, often when I put in buttons for submit, I write the AJAX callbacks by defining it as an AJAX callback event. But you can just go into this event here, go into server side, choose after dialog validate. This is when things are about to be saved to a database. And that's where you can put in your code. And what I like to do is I just put in a debug here. And what's handy about that is when you run it, you can go and take a look and see what was being sent back to the server. So I'll go ahead and save component. So this is a really good trick when you're debugging or when you're developing. So let's go ahead and go into working preview, for example. And I'll put in first name is going to be Bob and last name will be Smith. And I'm going to submit that. And my debugger pops up. Let me clear that out. And we're going to put in the E variable. That's the variable that you get back. Within E, we're going to take a look at data submitted. And you'll see what was sent back was a JSON object with first name Bob, last name Smith, and city is blank. All right, pretty cool. So that's how you get data submitted back. So you'll get this back as an object. You want to parse that, probably using something like JSON parse. So you could say e.datasubmitted.jform1 JSON underscore parse. And then you get back your object this way, and then you can divide that up into you could start using that back in your code, server side in XBasic. So let me go ahead and close that down. All right, so let's go back to the list of stuff that we've covered. I showed you how you can just simply take your standard submit and reset buttons and use them with a JSON form, and it will send back that JSON package that your AJAX callback can then handle. And you saw the preview window. Let's go back into my PowerPoint. There are a few more other things that I want to go over. Yeah, let's take a look at importing from a spreadsheet. This is really cool, this dynamic stuff. And for that, we're actually going to use, I'm actually going to scrub through a video and show you that. Let's open this one. Okay. Oh, I have it right in my clipboard, don't I? Yep. Okay, so let me show you here. This is one of the examples, and I thought it was really cool. And this is the one where it was driven from a database. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. I'll show you what I was talking about. So it's this one here, where we have an Excel file. The Excel file is used to create this form. So how did we do that? That's actually shown in this video, but I'm going to show you the highlights of that. All right. So let me just scrub ahead. And that was where he was giving you an example of what's in the database and how the form is now respected on that. So that's not quite the video I wanted to show you. It would be this one. Okay. And so in this example, I'm going to make this bigger so it's not teeny. And we're going to scrub ahead into the code because this part is kind of interesting. So what he's done is he's written an Ajax callback, and I want to direct your attention to the code here. By the way, this component can be downloaded, so you don't have to just look at the code here. You can actually copy and paste it, and you'll find that back on the page we were just on that listed all the videos. So you'll see that there are a couple of interesting functions, helper functions. So A5 helper get JSON form items from database is a special high-level function that we have written specifically for the case of taking database things. So it could be SQL, or it could be anything you have a connection string to. It could be an Excel spreadsheet like we've done here. And giving it some parameters, you can tell it how you would like that data to be created. So here is the path to our spreadsheet. That is the table. And then we went ahead and we built it just like that, including a thing called set JSON form items, another method that you have available. So take a look at these helper functions, take a look at this, and do take a look at this sample component, which you're going to find right here under data-driven JSON forms to see how that works. All right, the next thing I wanted to cover were, oh yes, the available containers. You have a lot of choice when it comes to styling. And just in case you hadn't guessed, I'm only going to be scratching the surface of all the stuff you get here. So let me go back to Alpha Anywhere, Design, Controls, and let's open up my JSON form. So my JSON form, for example, I can put stuff into containers. And I have a bunch of cool containers here. So I can put them in groups and stuff like that. I can put them into a repeating container. Repeating containers are good for when you have parent-child data and you want to repeat, in other words, iterate through the list of child records and show them in a section. That's what repeat is for. But you can also put things into pages. That's very handy. So you could take a group of fields, put them on one page, and then go to another page. And pages have got buttons that let you take you directly to those pages. Definitely worth playing around with. Freeform layout gives you an awful lot of options for how you would like that control to work. And we use that when we're designing transform. But you'll also notice that we have tabs. So you can put together the tabbed interfaces very much like you can in the UX, much like you can do with a tabbed UI. You can do that here in the JSON form builder as well. So I wanted to show you that that's there. There are some predefined controls. For example, the ability to go directly to a page once you've built the container are right here. Those are the buttons that take you there. So in other words, you'd use the container, you put the fields you'd want in a container, and then you'd use the controls to bring you to the container. It also has list and detail view buttons, and that's because it's not uncommon to use the JSON form as the detail view for a list control. And I'm going to show you that when we get into the Genie. And I think the Genie will actually be the last thing I show you. So before we get to that, I want to show you one more thing. And that's the question that everyone has when they're working with this for the first time. And they say, okay, that's cool. But now that all of my controls are built into a, yeah, I can exit without saving. That's fine. Cancel. Yes. Great. Now that all of my controls are built into here, what if I wanted to programmatically set a value? So typically when you set a value, say of a text field, and I'll just go ahead and add one, right now, call it text box 1. You could, for example, add a button. Go ahead and add a button that sets the value. I'm going to say set value of field. And then that button, I would, we typically do this in JavaScript. There isn't actually an action JavaScript for this because it's, I guess, because it's so easy. But basically, you'll say insert a component method. We're going to say set value. Set value. Here we go. And the control we're going to set is the text box. The value we're going to set is, let's do a hello world. Why not? And then we don't have to worry about the optional parameter there at the end. So when I click that, it simply says, this is how we use set value. It simply says take a value and put it into the text box. So this is how you do it when you're working with a regular field, when you're not working with a JSON form. So let me go ahead and do a quick preview of that. I'll show you that when I push the button, provided I did everything right, boink, yeah, my text field now says hello world in it because I used that JavaScript. So the question is, how the heck do you do the same thing, but with a JSON form? Because the JSON form only has this one, control name. So how do you tell it that you want to control within the control? Well, we have actually thought of that for you. So I'm going to show you 2 ways that you can set values in that JSON form control. So let me go back to the PowerPoint. We're going to take a look at getting and setting values. So first of all, you can use the standard get value and set value commands that you may be used to, but keep in mind what you're going to be sending back is going to be an array of values in a string, basically in JSON format. So if you said get value from JSON form, it's going to give you all of the field values back, much like we saw in our debug. It'll show you the city, state, zip, whatever they are. And if you wanted to set them, you could do that as well. But this always brings back all the values. This always sets all of the values. But what if you just wanted to bring back a particular field, or if you wanted to set a particular field? We've got a new way of doing that. Well, fairly new. And that is to specify this thing here. It's called, when you're setting the value, you type in JSON form : then it's the name of the form that you're setting, followed by : and then it's the name of the field. That'll pull that particular city field right out of my JSON form and set it to a value called text. Much the same way, if you wanted to set the value, the syntax is very similar. Again, JSON form, the name of your form, the name of your field. Oops. That would be an error right there, comma. Okay, and that's how you do it. All right, so the last thing I want to show you, well, 2 last things, I guess. One is I want to just take you on a quick tour here through these videos just to describe some of the ones that you might find particularly interesting, although I think you should watch them all. Let's go back here and here, and let's go. All right, so that's just a basic introduction. You've seen that. The get value, set value stuff I just showed you, so you may not need to watch that one. Or you can rewatch it, it's fine. This is interesting. You can do, I told you before about repeating sections, how we handle child and parent and grandchild and so on. And so you can display each of the things, iterate through them, but you can also perform calculations such as totals and averages on that data when it comes back out. We do have various forms of containers, including the ability to do tabs and accordions. This shows you how to do it. This next one shows you how to do pages, which I talked about before. This other one, and I hadn't mentioned before, is that these are extremely responsive. So this is a really good control to have when you don't really know the screen size that you're dealing with. So it's going to work great in mobile, it's going to work great in desktop, and it's going to work great if they change the screen size right in the middle. So this shows you how it works. It uses flex, which I described, I think, last week or the week before, how that works, how it's a relative value based on the screen size. Data-driven forms, you might want to take a look at those videos. I sort of gave you a quick overview, though, of how those work, and you can download the component there, as you can for all the other ones. Using predefined JSON form layout, that is worth taking a look at, and that's for doing a detail view. I'm going to show you the Genie in a second, which covers a few of these. The other thing is that if you're using a data-bound UX, and this is like sort of the first way people were putting UXs together, is if you were in the builder, that's what I mean by data-bound, is if instead of using a list control, you are to instead bind the whole UX to a particular data source, like you can do here, you can still use that with a JSON form. JSON form knows how to get the data from that data binding. We'll show you how to do that in that video as well. The JSON Form Tester we've used for a lot of other things. It's actually a separate tool, and it's good for more than just JSON forms. It is a tool that, let me just show it to you again, because it is very, very handy. And I think you will find that under Tools, JSON Form Template Tester window. This is a very neat tool. It gives you these different columns here where you can paste in data, the template, the JavaScript that goes with it, and the CSS, and you can see how it behaves here. So it's kind of like Fiddle.js or one of those other things maybe you've seen online where you can put in, for example, JavaScript, CSS, and HTML just to see what's going to happen. It's the same thing here as your HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and your JSON data, and it'll show you how it is handled here as well, but it can be used in other places. So this is a great way of writing and debugging. So I just wanted to show you that real quick. Edit combos. Yes, you can do edit combos. There are a bunch of different control types. Let me show that to you real quick. Oops. Let's go back to controls. And under controls, so here you definitely have more controls just in a standard UX layout than you do in a JSON form, but the JSON form does have a ton of controls. So let's just show you what they are. If I said data controls, for example, you have all of these options here, including the ability to do multi-select lists, auto-suggest lists, checkboxes, drop-downs, all that. There's even a star rating, which is great. Images that are bound to a data source, you can do that as well. Other controls are just your basic things, the button HTML image and custom JSON. The containers I showed you, that's how you can do tabs and accordions and repeating sections. And I think favorites, well, that's up to you to define. So cool. So that is that. And then I think that's the last thing I want to show you except for the Genie. So let's take it away from the Genie. Let's pop over to the Genie. Cancel. Quick Start Genie. Okay, so the Quick Start Genie you'll find when you insert, oops, fix it without saving. Yes. When you insert a JSON form and you double click on it to open properties, you're going to find a link here which says Quick Start Genies. If I click Quick Start Genies, it says create form from sample JSON data. So you could just paste in any JSON object right here and have it build the thing out for you, which is great. This is quick input, and this basically lets you set a whole bunch of controls along with their type. Let me show you the syntax for that. You could say, you know, here's the name of my field, here is the type of control that it should be, and if there are some options that go around with it, for example, a button multi-list you might want to have pre-populated, you can do that as well here. Very powerful. Create a form based on list data. So if I had a list control in my UX component, I could just point this Quick Start Genie to that list control, which is really cool. UX data binding, as I explained before, you can bind the entire UX to a data source, and this lets you do it by mapping the fields. I don't have this set up yet, but that's how you would map the fields. And then this is Xdialog, but this is for people who are familiar with the desktop Xdialog style stuff. That's kind of older stuff, so I don't mess with that. So let me go ahead and hit cancel. And I just want to show you all those things were available. There's also the ability to import. Oh, that's not coming up, so I guess I'm not going to show that to you. But one thing I do want to show you is that when this is done, this JSON form builder is done, it actually creates itself, JSON form items. This is actually the definition of your form. It is in fact also in JSON. So that's all you really need to keep or save if you wanted to reuse a component like this. And then under more, you can import and export your JSON forms and so on. And you can save them to a repository so that you can reuse things. Like, for example, if you had things for user information that you wanted to use multiple places in your application, you might reuse them as a reusable JSON form. So I hope I haven't confused you, but I hope I've convinced you that JSON forms are pretty cool and are very powerful. One of the places that we've used them, I'm going to just sort of leave you with this, is in the new transform. Let's go to transform beta. And I'll show you, whoops, how and why we use them. All right, let's see if I type that in right. Yeah, I did. Okay, great. Let's go to Acme Rocket, I guess. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so where we used JSON forms, no, is up in here. We got to up in these areas here. These were actually perfect for that sort of thing. And what's great about this, you see all of the choices and stuff, the drop downs, the accordions and all that. This is all JSON form stuff, which means that when we want to edit this, we're not going to be editing our application itself. We're going to be editing simply the definition that it pulls from, which makes it really very convenient when we're working in teams. So one person can actually have the component or have the whole control and be able to publish it, but we have other people who are working on it who can make changes and lay out these things. So it's worked out really well for us. It's a technology that we use an awful lot. All right, so I've been ignoring questions. Let's go see if there are any. Let me just open up GoToMeeting. We'll take a look. Meantime, you can enjoy my cows from the Alps here. All right. Can JSON forms be populated like a view box? The answer is yes, they can be populated like you can do in a view box. In fact, a view box is pretty similar to a form view control, but a form view control is, I'm sorry, to a JSON form, but a JSON form is aware that it's going to be used not just for viewing data. Yeah, you can edit stuff in view boxes too, that's true, but it's, it's meant really as a form device. I don't think I knew about repeat. Oh, that's cool. So hey, I showed someone something today. Yeah, repeat is really cool. So you can use the repeating section so that you can use hierarchical data. Demo containers and frames in an iForm. This is where it's done thing. This is where things are done behave. Oh, I see. Someone said that they've run into some issues using containers and frames in a JSON form, like it was doing stuff they weren't expecting. I was wondering, maybe you could send an email over to guides, GUIDES at alphasoftware.com. Let me know what you've been running into. We can diagnose it. I'd be happy to come back and show it to folks next time we're here. And then another question here is, what is the use case for JSON forms as opposed to standard controls? So I think the biggest use case is that you can do them on a data-driven basis, so that if you have an application where you would like to rearrange the fields on the fly, you can do that. Or if you have an application which you want to provide maybe a client a spreadsheet that they edit to change the form rather than you giving them the actual application, that's another good way of doing it. You can have it use logic to dynamically generate it. So I would say it's the flexibility of it being data-driven and being able to be changed on the fly is probably one of the biggest advantages to using that. As you can see, I don't know if you saw it earlier, but there was a slight time advantage, maybe 20% faster when using a whole bunch of fields. But beyond that, that's it. In fact, when I built the Alpha Test Drive application, there was originally a JSON form that was being used in the login screen. But I decided that in that case, I removed that and went back to using standard controls there because I think it was much easier for someone else who was coming in to edit that control and get it to work the way they wanted to. There was no reason for something like that to be data driven, and there was no, and it wasn't really there was going to be a huge time saving since a login form usually only has a couple of fields on it anyway. Am I using the latest stable one for this demo? I happen to be using the nightly release from Tuesday, I think. Again, if there's some issue that you are running into, send it over to guides, guides at alphasoftware.com. You can also do, if it's if you think it's like a bug, like it's really not working the way that it looked like it was documented to, you can send it to bugs at alphasoftware.com. But do make sure that you include an example and what version of the software you're working on. How did I get the form to load the times at the bottom of your form? I actually didn't. I relied on Google Chrome to do that for me, but let me show you that because it's actually useful. Oops, let's go back into Alpha Transform. So let's take this one, for example. This one should load really fast, I think, depending on how taxed my machine is at the moment. So there's my working preview. In working preview, you'll see you've got some links down here. And one of them is to open the Chrome debugger, which I'm going to do. So there's the Chrome debugger. And usually when you open the Chrome debugger, I think you're usually here either at console or elements, but what you want to choose is you want to choose network. That's going to show you how long it took to load stuff. So when you're in here, you're going to hit Control R, like it shows you. It's going to reload that page and it's going to tell you how long it took to load, 2.11 seconds. So this is a very handy thing to use when you are trying to optimize for speed. Again, there are ways to really optimize for speed. You could put thousands of fields on it, but I wouldn't necessarily do it with a JSON form, although you might. But that might be a case for a form view control with editor sets. You can look that up in the documentation, or we might get to it in another webinar. All right, let's see what else. That looks like it. If I didn't get to your question or I didn't answer it the way you liked, go ahead and send it to the guides, guides at alphasoftware.com. Thank you, everyone, for showing up today. Appreciate it. And I hope to see you at our next Wednesday webcast. Until then, take care and stay well. Bye-bye.